What is going on, everyone? Tutorial Tim here at Design Academy, and today we're going to be going over building card components, and we're going to gain an overview and understanding of the usage and need for cards, when to use them, and how to build these cards out utilizing the components we've already made. So we can go ahead and start off by opening up our team library modal here, and we need to turn on our material design system. And then we have access to the cards documentation here in this exercise file. So if we go ahead and open that link, what you'll see is that cards contain content and actions about a single subject. And here we have a great interactive demo showcasing the types of cards. There are several options for the elevated card. And then there's also an outline card. And in our Figma file, we're going to go ahead and build out 4 variants. 3 of them are elevated, so the elevated type here you can see within this there is drop shadow being utilized here on this elevated variant, and then on the outline variant it's literally just an outline as opposed to using drop shadow. So those are the differences between the 2 card types, and both those 2 card types, the elevated type and the outline type, have options with media, supportive text, and buttons, and you can mix and match them. Go ahead and mess around with those, get familiar with what's possible with these types of cards. And there's a lot of great context around how to use cards, and cards are technically surfaces that display content and actions on a single topic, and they should be easy to scan for relevant and actionable information. Elements like text and images, as you can see in the interactive demo, there's the text and the image example, and we have some actions too, some buttons specifically about that single topic in the card. And here's some principles where this card is contained, identifiable as a single contained unit. It is independent and can stand alone without relying on surrounding elements for context, and it is individual. A card cannot merge with another card or divide into multiple cards. And here we have a breakdown of the anatomy, and here, as you can see, the card container is the only required element in a card. All other elements shown are optional. So this container here is the holds all the card elements, and that is actually the only required element. So what this indicates is that card layouts vary to support the types of content they contain, and it's really specific on your needs when building out cards. So when you try to implement this as a system in Figma, all these optional variants should actually be their own elements when you publish them. So you can then start to build out your own card individually. So it has all of the defined functionality. Because if you just create these specific cards, maybe there are certain things you don't need from it, which you'll need to remove, therefore needing to create your own from scratch, which is why we want to build it from the ground up utilizing elements as opposed to refactoring one that's already been built. It's more modular in that sense. Here's some great, breakdown of behavior, usage, and whatnot. And I grabbed these screenshots of the specs, and what I really like about the specs is that it states for cards is that the section should not be read as prescriptive or exhaustive or also definite. These cards have no singular layout, typographic or image size, so none of this is extremely specified. So what they're trying to state is that it is designed to meet the needs of the content they present, so the content the designer is trying to present. So it is flexible in that sense that you can build out a card to your needs, and it shows a variety of layouts that help showcase how flexible it really is. So we'll go ahead, with that said, jump into Figma. And now that we're in Figma, we're going to go ahead and create the first card type. And one thing important about this is that the elevation for the rested state of a card is set to 1 dip. So under elevation here in the material design guidelines, there's a table of default values, which we've already gone over a few times before, and it shows that the card at the rested state is set to 1 dip on the right there. And when it is picked up, when this card is being interacted with or picked up, it utilizes the 8 dip default elevation value. So just a side note there, because we will need to know that to implement the elevated portion of the cards we build out. So with that said, let's go ahead and get to cracking on this elevated card here. So what we have is a title, but we're gonna go ahead and define the frame here. So we have a background color style of surfaces surface here, so it's just white, and the rounded corners are set to 4, or actually that's set to 8. And we're going to go ahead and copy the name of this. So I've already named these. So these cards live under the elevated category, and this has a title, some copy, body copy, an image, and actions, which is all stated there. So I'm going to click on that, rename this layer, or frame better yet. And now we can go ahead and specify the width and height of this. So it's set to 344 dips in terms of width and 148 dips in height. Now that we have that specified, the more I look at this corner radius, it should be set to 4. Now that we're good to go, it just looked different when we didn't resize it to its proper dimensions, which is fine. So now what we know is that this utilizes 2 buttons, and we can pull in a placeholder image from our assets. So if we go to with our material design system library enabled, we can go ahead and search in our assets panel for, I can literally just type in placeholder, and there we go. I can also use this icon placeholder as an image placeholder. So if I drag this in here, I can set the width and height there to 80 dips, and then I can ensure that I am positioning this properly by 16 dips on the top and right. And I'm going to set the constraints to top and right so that it it maintains that spacing on the top and right when resized. Now we can go ahead in our assets panel and search for buttons, and here we have the text button variant, and what we can do is label this action 1, and I can select this again, and just set the spacing properly. So this spacing is set to 16 from the beginning of this text. So what that means is if I pull out my rulers and I move this over 16 pixels, right now it's 16 pixels to the left, or dips to the left of the frame, but it wants the typography to be, the beginning of the text to be 16 dips away. So what I can do with this space properly, in regards to the bounding box of the button, I can add this ruler here, and with that ruler I can go ahead and push this text inward. So now that text is 16 dips to the left of the parent frame there. And then I can go ahead and just duplicate this, and it is set to 8 dips to the right, the second action here, the second button. I'm going to relabel that action 2, and we should be good. And now we just need to add in our body copy and a title. So whoops, I'm going to pull out my text here, ensure that that's set to text and iconography color style, which is set to a high emphasis, and then I'm going to label this title. Whoopsie. I'm going to select the proper text style, and that should be set to, let's see here, subtitle 1 I currently have specified, so title goes here. And with that specified, I'm going to make sure that in the type details, the resizing is set to auto width, so it snaps accordingly and adheres to the proper line height specified in our type system. And then I'm going to use my shortcut keys, Option W and A, to snap to the top and left, and then push this over twice and down twice. So I have the padding top and left set to 16 because I've modified my nudge amount to 8 on the small nudge as opposed to my big nudge. So I've reversed this. I highly recommend you modifying your nudge amount to that, so you don't have to increment it by 1 all the time. Since this system is divisible by 8, I can just move it in increments of 8 every time I use the arrow keys, which is very efficient. So I'm going to duplicate this style here, and what we're seeing here is our text box. Let's specify the body to body 1 there. Whoa, to body 2, and text to body 2, and then go ahead and apply medium emphasis to the color style. And with that medium emphasis applied, I'm gonna just copy what's written in this spec component. secondary line text, lorem ipsum dolor sit amet. Not sure if that's actually a word, but that's all right. And now that I have that specified, I'm going to push this up 8 pixels. And what I want to ensure is that the text box is 16 pixels to the right of the image. Right now it's set to 21. So I can go ahead and increase that by 5. And now it's set to 16. What I can do is set the constraints to top, left, and right. And bottom if need be. And then as you can see here, our buttons are 8 dips from the top of this text bounding box, and everything is divisible, has the proper measurements and whatnot. So that is fantastic. Now all we have to do is just double check our parameters here. Things are set to 16 and we are good to go. We have now created our first card. Actually, the last thing we need to do is go ahead and go to our effects and apply that elevation, set that to 1 dip, and now we're good to go. So we've created our first card, and we can kind of double check some things and see if this utilizes a different subtitle by referencing materials documentation. So if we go to our specs and just scroll up a bit, it'll tell you the title actually uses an H6 and it uses body 1. So if I selected body 1, whoops, but that's for a certain theme. So just take note of that we should adhere to the styles being used and referenced. Even though the properties may be different in another theme, it still uses those styles. So now I need to go ahead and change this subtitle to an H6, and that is good to go. I now have everything attached accordingly. And yeah, we are good. So apparently this just uses body 1, and for metadata it uses body 2. So let's go ahead and modify this accordingly. And now that we have modified that, our card should be good to go, but it actually doesn't look like that's the proper text style. It should be smaller, the font, so we'll leave it as is, and we're good to go. All the constraints and measurements are properly set, and we can go ahead and duplicate this and publish this as a main component. So we now have our first component created, and we can even go ahead and create another version of this where it's actually an outline card. So for the outline card, what we can do is, what we're going to want to do first is remove this elevation style, add a stroke, and it's set to 1 pixel, 1 dip, as you can see here, 1 dip. And the color set to, under surfaces, surface overlay. And that is the outline of the card, as you can see there, zoomed in. And with that, a lot of these properties are actually the same, but the height of our card is taller. And one thing I did mess up on this card is that the spacing below these 2 buttons should be set to 8 dips instead of 16 dips. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, hold Command as I change these dimensions here. And now I have it set to 8 dips from the bottom, and this card should be good to go. Now I'll go ahead and touch this up here. I might just reduplicate this so I don't have to modify the dimensions of the spacing there, and detach it holding Option Command B. And then I'm going to relabel this layer and remove that elevation, and we're going to want to select outlined, the naming convention I've specified here already beforehand, and this naming convention clearly states what type of card this is. It's an outline card with an overline, utilizing overline a title, which includes the body copy below it, and then an image and some actions being our buttons. So now I'm going to go ahead and reapply that stroke color style, which is surface overlay, and that's set to 1 dip or pixel. And what we're going to need to do is increase the height of this card real quick, and we're going to need to push this content down because the baseline of this headline or this header is 40 dips away from the baseline of the overline text style. So what I can do is just push this content down, duplicate this text style or this text, and then change it to overline. And with overline specified, I'm just going to write out overline, and then I'm going to ensure that it is 16 dips from the top, which it is. So now that we have our overline specified, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that the baseline is 40 dips away from the typography here, from the title here. And this title uses an H5, so it's slightly bigger, as you can see. Now I'm going to go ahead and double check, add this red line to the first baseline, add a red line to the second baseline of the title here, which is, I'm going to call it headline 5. And then I'm going to grab a square and just calculate that manually. So that is currently set to 41. So what we want to do, we were pretty close. Push that up 1 by default. And now it's set to 40 right there, as you can see, which is exactly what we wanted to achieve. So that is fantastic. I can have my rulers hitting Shift R. And we're good to go in that regard. So let's go ahead and close out this spacing from the headline and this text. And this baseline of the headline is 24 dips above the baseline of this body copy. So we can go ahead and do the same process here and just add another red line here to this body copy. Grab a rectangle and ensure that this is all being done properly, and it currently has a height of 27. So what we're going to want to do is push that up through a few pixels and ensure that this is set to 24 now. The baseline is now 24 dips away from the baseline of the headline, the header 5 specifically, H5, and our text styles there. And we can go ahead and double check our spacing between the body copy and buttons, and that for some reason isn't specified in our spec, but it is specified here. And this, so it looks like it's set to 16 pixels below the typography, and then below the buttons themselves, if I go ahead and rename those buttons to buttons, so I'm not getting confused between the types of buttons in the other card, I can go ahead and double check these elements and push them over. So the padding on the left is set to 16 now. So that is more consistent. And you'll notice that the buttons actually pushed in now, and the buttons type isn't aligned with the type of the body copy right there. So that is important to take note of. It'll appear visually slightly indented. Then I can change the spacing between the two buttons to 8 dips again, as it should be. 8 dips there, and then 8 dips below the buttons. So now I'm gonna go ahead and just grab this card, hold down Command, and pull this up. It's currently set to 9 dips below. So if I push that up 1 more pixel, we're good to go. It's now 8 dips below, and now everything is up to spec as need be. We have our overline, the title and the body copy, and the image, which we can replace here in the fill style and just select an image there. So when designers duplicate this, and then we have our actions, which are our buttons. So now that that's done, That is fantastic. We'll go ahead and create our next card. So we got that as the main component now. Next, we're going to go ahead and tackle this more complex component. And what we're going to need to do is we'll actually need this component here. We have this set of stars. So set of stars in the spec, I'm going to disregard that from this component because I actually have some purposes for this component in particular that I want to use later on. So I'm going to build it without the stars because I don't need to communicate those ratings. And what I can do is create this variant here, specify the width to 344 dips and the height to 510 dips and the corner radius to 4. And this is an elevated card. So I'm going to go to my effects and apply the 1 dip elevation. Then I'm going to go to my fill and select surfaces, surface, color style. Now that that is linked, I'm going to go ahead and just ensure that I have the proper name for this component in my components. And then we have a image placeholder. As you can see here, I can just grab the placeholder that we have in our system and specify the width to 344 dips and then the height to 194, and then hold down Option W and A to snap that properly into our component as needed. And then I'm going to set the constraints to top, left, and right, so that way when this stretches, if it needs to be stretched, it doesn't get all funky. It'll snap to all the edges properly so it looks clean. And with that said, we have a title that is 44 dips. The baseline of this title is 44 dips from the top of this image. So if I go ahead and add this title in here, and then apply the proper text style of subtitle 1, or actually it's the H5 title, I believe. There we go. And then I'm going to select the resizing and set that to auto width. I'm going to push this down and push that down a bit, push that to 30, and double check the baseline. So the baseline from the image should be set to 44, which is actually right here. So it's actually 24 dips from the top of the image, with the baseline being 44 dips from the top. And now I'm going to disregard these stars here, and even I can add some secondary text. So with the secondary text, I'm going to utilize the caption text style. So if I duplicate this, change the text style, and go to caption, I can select that and set that to secondary text. Make sure that's 16 dips from the left of the container of the card. And I'm going to make sure both these fill styles are set to text and iconography high emphasis. And once that is done, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this secondary text style, push it down, and stretch out the text box so that it is 24 dips from the right of the container, the card container. And with that, I'm going to push that over 3. Now it's set to 24 from the right. Set the constraints to top, left, and right. And then I'm just going to add in this body copy that is already in this card. And I'm going to pause it real quick. This typography specified, you'll notice that it uses a divider too, so we can even pull in our divider component that we've created. Divider there, pull that in, and you'll notice that it is 16, has a padding of 16 dips on the left and 16 dips on the right. So we can bring, and we can do the math if we wanted to. This is the width of this component is 344. And then minus 32 is 312, so we can change the width of this to the divider to 312. So when we bring it into our component, and it's a little hard to grab, so I can just go to my layers panel and drag it in if I need to, and then hold down Option H, and that will align it horizontally, and then Option V to align it vertically, the alignment properly. And I can push this down and ensure that that is 24 dips from the baseline of the second baseline of text in this body copy. So if I push this up, I need to make sure that that's set to 24. So if I grab a text a box, I can measure 24 dips from the bottom. I was almost there. I was close. So now that that's set to, the baseline is 24 dips away. So I'm going to push this down one more. Whoops. I'm going to grab this divider, push it down one more pixel. And it's from the text box, it's of this body copy, it's set to 20. So that's good to note. And we need to change the color of this text, this body copy, from high emphasis to medium emphasis. And now that is accurate. With that divider implemented, we can go ahead and add another caption, or actually it's a subtitle. So I can duplicate this one and push this down a bit, label it subtitle, then just change the text style to subtitle. Now that we have the subtitle, I'm going to select subtitle 2. It uses a smaller subtitle, it looks like, just to maintain the hierarchy there. I use subtitle 1, I believe, and then just make sure that the spacing is appropriated. So it's the baseline is 36 dips from the divider, so we can go ahead and measure that from this divider. Currently we have it 41 dips away, so I can push up this element, and now we have this 36 dips away from the divider, which is great. And I'm going to go ahead and add in some chip components. So we have some action chips being utilized here. So if I type in action chip, or just actually chip into our assets panel, I can drag a chip in. And what I'm going to do with this chip is I can duplicate it a couple times, right? And they're spaced 8 dips away from each other. So I'm going to throw 3 chips in here, and they're all labeled differently. Item 1. One thing we need to ensure is that these chips utilize auto layout, and it doesn't look like it's utilizing auto layout right now. Because I needed to add up auto layout to my chips because they weren't adapting to the size of the text. So now if I go in and type in item 1, it will maintain the proper spacing on the left and right. And here you can see we have 4 chips. So let's go ahead and select those here. We have item 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm just going to label those accordingly. And now I can go ahead and just restructure the spacing there, make sure those are all 8 dips apart. And I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop this into my the component here, and it specifies the baseline 14 dips away from the top of the chip, and I'm assuming that that is actually 8 dips away from the bounding box of the typography. I can go ahead and double check that, and technically it is it's the baseline here is 15 dips away, but we're going to go ahead and maintain the spacing from the top of the subtitle and keep that at 8. And now that we have that specified, all we're missing is an action below, which is 20 dips away from the chip. So if I go ahead and go to my assets and type in my assets panel, type in button, search for that button, it's not appearing. So if I go ahead and retype that, and it searches And I can grab this text button and just drag that into the canvas. Now I can just rename this to action 1. And once this action's been renamed, I can go ahead and drag it into my new card component and ensure that the spacing is set accordingly. Make sure that's set to 20. That's indicated in the spec here. It's 20 away, and it is 8 pixels away. The outer frame of the button's 8 dips away from the parent container because it will align the typography with the chip here. You see that? That's why that button is 8 dips away, because it aligns the typography of the button with the rest of the content in the card. And then I just need to specify that this is 8 dips below the spacing. So I can grab the parent container, hold down Command as I drag up. Make sure that's set to 8. Right now we have it at 5, so I just push this down 3 pixels and we are golden. Awesome. So we've now created one of the more complex card components in material design, one of the examples again. So I'm going to go ahead and challenge you to create this card component by yourself, and then I'm going to pause the video and show you the optimal way of building out these card components. All right, I'm going to pause it. So I have now finished creating all the elements. I created this variant here, the exact replica, and I did it a little differently this time. And the reason I wanted to go through this exercise the way I just did before I show you everything is very intentional. I want to showcase to you the manual process of building this component, and then the power of having these elements that I just created to use as building blocks for a design system, not only for yourself, but for the designers you cater to if you ever work on a design systems team. So here, here you can see that we've manually created our cards here, some examples of more composed cards. And then I went ahead during this break and not only made these elements here, but I composed them properly. So when I say I compose them properly, these are all specifically elements for cards. The width of these cards are defined by 344, certain variants of them. And here's like, we have them labeled as elements, text tiles, and you can think of them as tiles. As you add tile onto a floor, you can arrange them and add them and stack them and whatnot. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So with these elements, I can break down what these are composed of, and then it's wrapped in a frame with the proper background color, which is set to surface to surface, and then the proper elevation, the resting elevation is being set to 1 dip, and then of course the elevated state is set to 8 dips there, as you can see, the 2 differences there. And in this frame, if I click on this frame, go ahead and I go ahead and check out, I go ahead and check out the elements in this frame. I have 3 pieces in this component. So I can drag these out and notice that they don't have any background color applied to them, except this is an image placeholder. So, and see, this is what it is composed of, these 3 elements here. So that is super important to note and understand. So it uses these elements to start building and adding on top of each other into the card. And these are all elements you can have in your design system, and it's explicitly, that's why it's there. So we can go ahead and build out an example. So you could create several examples of this. So we could start off with this heading. I can copy that heading, and maybe the heading has supportive text, right? And then I can go ahead and add like an image, this supportive image above the heading. So we have the media and then the heading there, and then we have the supportive text below. So what I can do now that these are all connected, I can select them all and then wrap them in a frame. I selected them all, and then Option Command G to create a frame. And now I'm going to click on the fill color, go to surfaces and select surface. Ensure I have the proper rounded corner radius, set that to 4 pixels or dips there. And then just click clip content. And we're going to go to effects and select 1 dip on the elevation styles. And look how quick we were able to build a card component using elements as opposed to going in and ensuring everything's pixel perfect, dragging and dropping stuff around. So if you do it, if you build out these elements once with pixel precision, pixel perfection, you should be good to go. And that is all I have to show you in this video today, folks. I really hope you enjoyed this and learned a lot, and I'll catch you in the next one.